Welcome to official Axanar Podcast number 72. I'm your host, Keith M. Sedor. In here with me, as always, is the captain of the fleet captain, Kelvar Garth, the man who will bring victory to the Federation and bring the Klingons to their knees. You know him better as Alec Peters. How are you, Alec?
Good, sir. How are you doing today?
I would be better if I wasn't awoke in the middle of the night with the bad news that we got. I am so completely crestfallen at the passing of our good friend and colleague, Gary Graham.
Yeah, I also found out in the middle of the night. Crystal let me know. She was at work heading home and messaged me, and yeah, it's such a shame. I mean, 73 is kind of young these days, you know.
It really is.
And he was. We were fortunate that we shot with him in October, and it was great. He was there at the wrap dinner and got to sit opposite Dave Lanyon, our benefactor, and he enjoyed himself immensely. And it's just such a shock. I saw a lot of messages today on Facebook from fans who were upset. It was great to see people who posted pictures of them and Gary at a convention. There was one with the cast of Axanar when we did a convention in Houston that I saw. So I really, it's a shame. We like Gary immensely, and he just, he had only moved, within the last, I want to say it's 2 years up to Spokane Valley. With his wife Becky, and didn't really get to enjoy his retirement that much. I mean, I'm just kills me.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I mean, he wasn't just a good actor; he was a good person. He was a really genuinely good guy, and you could tell that because when he and I sat down for an interview back, I think it was in 2018 when we were at the Axanar convention. It wasn't like a curt, short, factual thing. We had a good time. I posted pictures both on my personal Facebook and also on the Trekyards Roundtable Facebook page from when he and I sat down, and all the pictures of he and I laughing together and joking around. And I also got to host a panel with him and J.G. Hertzler and David Gerald, and he just livened a room when he was there. He was a very easygoing, fun guy, lighthearted. And it was in such stark contrast to him playing the character of Saval, who is very focused and cerebral. And it was just like the opposite of Gary.
Yeah.
That you could really tell when you meet a person like that versus what you were expecting because of the character they play. It only speaks to when somebody plays a character so opposite their vivacious personality, it shows you what a really good actor they are. So
yeah, and Gary was a wonderful actor. We had great times with him. I posted today and I said that Gary was that Saval was the rock upon which Prelude to Axanar was set.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought about that after. I said, am I phrasing that right? Because and what I meant was, whereas Richard, the actor, was the one who we really built the cast around, right? Mm-hmm. Richard was the first hire, and he led us to JG and then Gary, and it expanded from there. And Karn is obviously such an important figure, but really, there's a part of Prelude that is Saval centric, mm-hmm. and in a way, it's in many ways, I was thinking of this. It's kind of the way that if you're a fan of Justice League, the new mm-hmm. Justice League movie, the Joss Whedon cut is really it's not anyone's particular story other than. It's kind of the Trinity. It's kind of Batman's got his role, Wonder Woman's got her role, and Superman, obviously, that's the big piece. But if you watch the 4-hour Snyder cut, which I really think is one of the best superhero movies, which I've seen it 3 times, and if you watch the Snyder cut, the movie is really about Cyborg.
Okay.
He's the focal point of that movie. And through it, his humanity and his tragedy, and there's a whole arc in there. And in a way, that's kind of how I envision Soval, in that Soval is it's not his story. He's the connecting tissue to the rest of the Star Trek empire, the Star Trek canon, right? When people, today even I saw people saying that I consider Axanar canon. God bless you, those who say that.
I've said that.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I love it when I hear that, because it means we struck the right chord. But I would argue that one of the main reasons people say that is because of Soval. Because Soval ties it into Enterprise. And Gary's performance was, I had a blast working with Richard Hatch, let me tell you. Building Karn from the ground up, from like 3 lines. I mean, I've told the story how Richard was like, there's like 3 lines in this script for me, because I hadn't really dove in. I said, you and I are going to build it out. But Soval was such a known quantity. And I went back and watched all the episodes with Soval of Enterprise, and made sure and it's that episode, it's the episode where, I think it's Kashara, the first of that trilogy.
The trilogy with
where
Kashara, the Forge. Yeah, it was either Kashara or the Forge right before.
Yeah, I think Kashara is the first one, I believe. Could be wrong here, but anyway, when Admiral Forrest dies, when he is saving Soval's life, right, at the Vulcan embassy, at maybe it's at the Federation embassy on Vulcan. Anyway, the conversation they have beforehand is all about Soval's growth. Because let's face it, when Soval's introduced in the first episode of Enterprise, what was the first episode again called of Enterprise?
Broken Bow.
Broken Bow, right. When Soval's introduced, he's a dick.
No, you want to punch him in the mouth.
You hate the Vulcans, right? However, what they did over the 4 seasons is that character grew, and he grows to be the linchpin of the Federation's form.
Mm-hmm.
And it all happens. It's all shown. It doesn't happen, but it's all shown in that episode of Kashara when Admiral Forrest and Soval are talking. And I really need to memorize this now, just because I love talking about it. But it's where Soval says how basically the Vulcans are scared of humans, right? You've got you've got the stubbornness of the Tellarites and the emotions of an Andorian, and and no one's gotten how fast humans conquered space, right? Warp travel.
Well, to your point, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So what happened is, and Forrest is like, you're scared of us, and that Soval isn't, but that Soval is telling Forrest, here's what you're up against.
Mm-hmm.
Because Soval has come such a long way. So when I cast Gary, and Gary's like, oh yeah, I'd love to revisit that character. I said, here you go. And I sent him the episode, and I sent him the time. I said, watch this. This is going to be from the jumping off point for everything you do in Axanar.
Yeah.
And and he loved Soval. He really did. Gary was such a wonderful actor, and he really loved it. And he loved telling the story about how he went to Rick Berman before the first episode, and he's like, okay, so I'm playing a Vulcan with no emotions. And Rick Berman said to him, no. Vulcans have all the emotions, but they're just bubbling below the surface, and you're constantly fighting not to let them out.
Yeah, in fact, I remember Gary had told me that story while I interviewed him back in 18 at Axicon.
Yeah.
But to your point, I think there's an absolute connecting thread, not just a prelude, but more to the point, between the conversation that he has with Forrest about Vulcan's admiration, secret admiration, hidden admiration for how far humanity had come in such a short period of time. He addresses that again with Talara in the Vulcan scene for Axanar,
Yes.
the walk and talk.
Yes. Which was well done. A good job by Bill Hunt and Robert Burnett on the Vulcan scene. And I think that is absolutely the thread that we're following through. And ultimately, as you find out a little bit about it in the next 2 episodes, but certainly once we release the full-length script and you read the script of Axanar, you realize that Soval is pulling the strings behind the scenes all the time. Now, his government may be pulling out of the Federation, but Soval ain't giving up. And there's a great there's a couple parts of Axanar. Like I think, let's face it, as they say, there's no new stories, right? Every story's been told before. There's a big scene, a big confrontation between Garth and Karn on a planet. And I tell everyone, hey, it's the end of Ice Station Zebra. If you've seen Ice Station Zebra, that's the end. That's this scene right here. Because that scene resonates with me, and I wanted to infuse that scene with that kind of tension. But there's another scene, and that's the scene at the end of Sum of All Fears. The Ben Affleck, when Ben Affleck plays
Emma said Ethan Hunt.
He's playing Harrison Ford character.
Jack Ryan.
Jack Ryan. And at the end of that, he finds out that there's been a back channel between the U.S. and Russia, and the Russian comes up to him, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what I want. And so you find out that there's a back channel happening in the 4 Years' War, and it's Soval and it's Moreau, and Moreau, who is the Klingon mentor for Karn, who's the last thought admiral, as we call him, as he's addressed in the script. Because I love that. Anyway, Gary just he knew that character, and he was able to really, really channel it so well. I mean, and he loved playing it. He said, he said something either like, I can't wait to put that crusty old soul back on one last time, or something to that effect, right? And so it was wonderful, and I will say that you listen, when you see the next 2 episodes, you'll notice that Gary's aged. He's 10 years older than he was when he shot.
As has Soval.
And so his performance is different this time.
Is it? How so?
In the next 2 episodes. I don't want to spoil anything.
Let me ask you this. Would you say it's like the difference between Sarek in Journey to Babel and Sarek in Next Generation?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Without the osmotic
Eremotic syndrome, yeah.
Eremotic syndrome, yeah. Without that. But yeah.
Wait. It was eremotic syndrome was what Picard had.
Oh, okay. What was it?
It was some kind of syndrome.
Yeah, it was okay. But the good news is that the lines we gave Gary take him down a certain path, and which he's able to execute really well. And so it was just wonderful. I got to say it again because I had so much fun with him, and I had so much fun writing Soval when I wrote Prelude over 10 years ago. I really enjoyed writing for Soval because he was just, I connected with that character so easily, and he was there on screen, right? It wasn't like I was writing, you're writing for Ramirez. Well, all the other characters were made up from whole cloth, right? Soval was a known character, but it actually...
Did you write Soval into Prelude with the expectation that it was going to be portrayed by Gary Graham, or just that, hey, I like this character and we'll get somebody good to do it, and then you got lucky to get Gary? How'd that happen?
No, I met Gary on the set of Star Trek Renegades in 2013.
Okay, when he was playing, what was it, Ragnar or something?
Yeah. And Sky Conway, who's a gentleman, invited me to come on board, even though I had very little. I had been working on Star Trek New Voyages for a few years by that time.
Okay.
Started with Star Trek New Voyages in 2010.
Is that the James Cawley one?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had been a producer on that, and we had grand visions with that. David Gerald and I were actually going to. David Gerald was going to be showrunner, and I was going to be producer. And we had some grand visions. Of course, those didn't quite work out. But nonetheless, I did a lot of work there producing on Star Trek New Voyages, and cut my teeth and brought in some good people like Mark Edward Lewis. And so Sky invited me to come on and be a producer, which was very gracious of him. And so I was on set, and I really got to see. That was like my first real that was my first fan film experience, right? I had been on the set of of Battlestar Galactica, the movie The Plan that they made. I was on that set for most of the time that was being filmed. Well, not on the set. I mean, I was there working, so I was on the set constantly. But this was a fan film, so that was a different story. But anyway, I met Bing Bailey on the set of that. Bing, who's our DIT and colorist, and Bing introduced me to Gary, and there was nothing. I was like, oh man, we chatted briefly, and then I followed up with him later, and after I got Richard, and he signed on board. So the goal was to have Soval in the script.
Okay.
And if we had not had Soval in the script, because it would have been Sarek, we would have replaced him with Sarek.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and see, because to be honest, I'd have to go back to see the earliest drafts, because since we wrote the full-length feature, which I wrote the full-length feature first, and Prelude was an afterthought, really. I don't remember I think Sarek was originally the main character, the main Vulcan in the original Axanar script. I'm gonna have to go back and check that out. But anyway, it was a pleasure having Gary on board. And as I have said before, and I've got to say it just because it's, we're honoring Gary, and this moment I'll never forget, because I have a lot of good memories with Gary clowning around at Comic-Con. He comes to Axicon. We have a blast. I was working on his music with him over the past couple of years. Mark Edward Lewis and I were helping him out. But the thing, the memory that I'll always cherish is when he was shooting, and he was shooting that line that says, "A Vulcan acquaintance of mine once said, 'Don't push the pigsskins to the thin ice.'" And so, at the risk of boring the people that are listening to the podcast, he kind of wasn't connecting to that line. And I realized, and I wasn't always on set. I just happened to be on set at this point.
Tell him it was Shran.
I realized he didn't realize it was Shran. So I pulled Christian Gossett, the director, aside, because I wouldn't talk directly to the actors. And just out of courtesy, right? You let the director do all the work with the actors. But I pulled Christian aside and said, "Now tell him that the acquaintance is Shran." And I don't even think Christian knew who Shran was, because he wasn't an Enterprise fan. Christian was a TOS fan and really I don't think had much experience with much of the new stuff.
So I think you have to like it all.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he goes over to Gary and whispers to him, it's when you say this line, you're talking about Shran. And Gary knew I had just talked to Christian, and Gary kind of like turns over to me and goes like that. Sure enough, the take you see in Prelude is the very next take. He nailed it. Which was so wonderful.
And that level of understanding was apparent, because that is one of the things that made Prelude as good as it was, because it wasn't just like, oh, we're making a little bit of Star Trek, with our fans. It was being made with the understanding that the actors, like, you could watch some other Trek fan films that have used real Trek actors. And if they're not directed in a way where they're tying back into canon, it doesn't feel like Star Trek, even though they're the actors in the uniforms that we all know and love. And Prelude had that because of things like what Gary did.
Yes. Yeah, I thank you. And I think that's true. And it's a combination of good writing. I don't want to say great writing, because good writing and that particular line was all mine. Christian also helped edit the script, and Christian was responsible for much of Ramirez's speech. But that line was mine because I really understood, right? I understood Star Trek. I understood Enterprise. I understood this character. And Gary obviously is playing the character. Mm-hmm. So it was very easy. It's like, listen, at the end of Picard season 2, when Q says goodbye to Picard, that is a combination of great writing by writers who know what they're talking about, know the characters, and great acting. And when you put those two together, I mean, it's that, I personally feel that's one of the great scenes in Star Trek, is that Q Picard farewell, is because it is both those things, great writing with great acting. And here, I feel that I certainly hit my pinnacle of writing with that line for that character. And Gary, on the other hand, is just knocking it out of the park. He's taking what the writer gives him and adding his special sauce of this character that he's played for so long, who I guess is one of the few characters and not a few non-bridge characters who was in all 4 seasons of Enterprise, I'm told. And he's knocking it out of the park. So Gary it's truly a wonderful memory for me. And I enjoyed having Gary on set so much. I mean, when he was, the other story I'll tell that isn't about Gary really, he is in the makeup chair getting his ears done. And he was on the first weekend, which I wasn't working the first weekend. I worked the second weekend. The first weekend, it's him and Ramirez, and I think it was Kate. I think it was Kate. But anyway, Gary's in the makeup chair, getting his ears done, getting his hair done, cracking everyone up, making jokes. Typical Gary, right? Gary is like, right? Gary's one of those actors that, he's not a method actor. He's going to sit down and get there and give it to you, right? Meanwhile, Tony Todd walks in, and he's in character as Admiral Ramirez, and I'm nowhere near Garth, right? I'm in producer mode. And, which is two very distinct things.
Sure.
And my team has gotten really good. Mark and Jeff and Crystal, they're really good about, like, when Alec's going to be acting, he is not producing. Take his cell phone away from him. Don't, yes, those are all absolutely things I need. It's like, leave me alone. I'm not a good enough actor to do that instant on thing. I have to work at it. I have to get in them, and I need space. So, at the October shoot, we had Bill Bianco, my boyhood friend and childhood friend, who I went to high school with, had come out, and we were like, okay, that's mini me over there. When I'm at Garth, everything goes through him. If he needs to come to me, he will, but he knows not to come with me unless someone's limbs hanging off. But Gary's like instant on. Tony Todd wants to get into it. And Tony Todd at one point comes to me and goes, he's wearing his white Admiral's uniform, and he's like, so what are these? And he's pointing to his little campaign ribbons, right? The little triangles.
Yep.
And I explained to him they're campaign ribbons, this and that. And he goes, okay, well, I'm going to assign something to each of these. So he literally was thinking, oh, okay, I got this for this battle. And that's the way Tony works. Very method. Yeah, it's much more method. And so we're all, Gary's cracking everyone up in the makeup room. And Tony Todd comes in all serious. And again, I'm having a blast. Earlier in the day, Tony had said to me, are you nervous? And I'm like, what am I to be nervous about? I said, I'm not on this weekend. My job's pretty much done. If I did my job, everyone here knows what they're doing, and there's nothing for me to do, right? So I'm like kicking back, and I'm really, I'm absorbing it. I'm enjoying it. I know that I'm going to be working next weekend. I'm knowing that we've worked really hard to get to this point. I'm letting everyone do their job. I'm not a micromanager. Everyone does their job, right? If someone needs to write a check, I'll write a check. But pretty much that was the line producer. And Tony Todd comes in, and he's like, and he stares at me and he goes, "You're my best commander." And I'm like, holy shit, he's doing that actor shit.
It's like working with Eric Stoltz.
And here I am laughing at Gary, and all of a sudden I'm like, and I'm trying to pull it all in and go, "Yes, sir." And Tony turns around and walks out. I'm like, holy shit. I was like so intimidated by Tony. So anyway, but that was Gary. Gary always keeps the set lively. Gary always kept everyone having fun. And then he and JG, we're going to be reposting the video of their conversations from Axacon 2018 because having them together was wonderful. And Gary is just a cut up, and he loved having fun. And we, obviously he's also an extreme right wing MAGA guy. And JG is the opposite. JG's like liberal, progressive guy. So, but they got along so great together, which was, again, professionalism on both parts. They never let that get in the way of having a good time or performing together. So yeah, I have nothing but good memories of Gary. And we're very excited that we got him to come back. Which honestly was because he came back because, he was kind of like Donnie. I think he was, he had gotten a lot of the bullshit from the haters. And when Paul Jenkins was fired, Paul tried to poison the well with Gary. And so we just kind of let it go because we knew we weren't shooting anytime soon. But I was working with Gary and I brought Mark Edward Lewis in, who's obviously a music composer and sound mixer. And because Gary needed help on his album, The Sons of Kirk.
Sons of Kirk, sure.
Yeah. And so we worked together. I offered my help. I said, "Hey, Gary, let me help you with this." And we had many phone calls. He had a lot of frustration with one of the guys in his band who was supposedly mixing things, and he had and we were offering our help, and emails back and forth and this and that, and then finally it got around time. I said, "Hey, how do you feel about playing Zaval again?" And it was like, "Yeah," because I think I'd like to put that crusty old guy back on, So yeah, and so boom, he's back in it, and we knocked it out in October. Thank God, because we have one more example of Gary in Star Trek for Star Trek fans.
Sure.
And we're happy we were able to get him in because he's such an important part to Axanar.
He really is. And after Prelude and after the Vulcan scene, I figured, okay, he's done and this is done. There's more Axanar to come, but we're not going to see, maybe we'll get the Battle of the Gas Giant, maybe we won't, but we're not going to see any more Zaval. So the very fact that sadly our good friend and colleague has passed, but there's still more of him to share with the Trek fan community is really, really heartening.
Yeah. And it was a lot of fun to write for him, because he also got a lot of extra lines through what the work that Mark Edward Lewis and I have done on putting assemblies together. When we were doing, when we put the assemblies together a year ago, after the January shoot last year, I had Mark start working on putting the assemblies on. Like, let's not wait, get them together. We barely had, we didn't even have 50% of the footage. We had maybe 40% in the can, I guess. I said, put it all together. Let's see. And he and I started playing with it. And it really allowed us to understand where the story was. And so And there was stuff, and I was like, yep, we need these. This is what we need. And it all turned out to be Saval lines. And so that was fun. So yeah, it's always fun to write for Saval, and because you're writing for Gary Graham, right? You're writing Saval, you're writing a Star Trek character. I literally am writing a real Star Trek canon character. Now, Axanar may not be canon to some people, which is fine. Which is fine. But Gary's Saval certainly is. And I think a lot of people appreciate that we're telling a story that honors Star Trek so much, which is ultimately, listen, CBS can say anything they want. The truth of the matter is they sued us because they thought we were too good. They said it. They said it twice. It's now in court documents in the public, so I can say it. It happened twice in settlement conference and mediation, and we know why they did. They said it off the record as well. And part of the reason Prelude to Axanar was so good was because of Saval, because it touched the soul of Star Trek fans, seeing that character again. It's not like we just had, it's very different than having JG. We had JG as Sam Travis. Oh, people are like, oh, it's JG Hurst, so we love JG, right?
But he wasn't playing Martok.
He wasn't playing Martok. We had Gary Graham playing Saval, who he had played in Enterprise. It just made it more real, I think.
Let me ask you this. I know that because of the terms of the settlement with CBS, that we have 2 more 20-minute episodes coming. So we've got 40 more minutes. Is that 2 more 15 or 20 minutes?
15-minute episodes.
Okay. So we've got 2 more. We've got 30 more minutes of Star Trek coming.
Yep.
The question I have is, now that you've brought Gary back to play Saval for this, and I realize it's not even been 24 hours since he's left us, but have you thought about, or more than I should ask, is there content that you shot with Gary that would have wound up on the cutting room floor or in deleted scenes that you say, you know what, this is all we're ever going to have of him? Maybe we want to expand that by a little bit or cut it. Is there stuff that you didn't use of Gary as Saval for the next 2 scenes that you might say, maybe we want to put that back in?
I don't think so.
Okay.
There may be things from Prelude, and I'll have to have Mark go back and check that out. But of course, he was in a different costume in that. In
Sure.
He is wearing the costume he wore in the Vulcan scene in the next 2 episodes.
Okay.
So it's a different costume than what he wore in Prelude.
Right.
It's a better costume. It's his. Actually, it's one of the costumes he wore in Enterprise.
Okay.
Yeah. That costume that you see in the Vulcan scene is entirely his from Enterprise. So, because I own that costume, so that's what he's wearing. And so he in the new episodes, literally, unless we cut out some lines, there's nothing left. He recorded everything that we needed him to record.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's not surplus that might wound up on the cutting room floor that would say, hey, there's stuff we haven't used. Maybe we'll still use it or something. Okay.
No. Yeah.
All right. So it is a tragedy because he was far young. I mean, like you said at the start of this conversation, 73 is very young comparatively today, versus 100 years ago. But he was a good man. He was a good spirit, and he always heightened the energy of a room when he came in. So it's truly a loss. Yeah,
or lightened it. Yeah, true loss.
What did I say?
Heightened,
lightened. He brought it up, but it is sad. He was a good friend and colleague, and he is somebody that was truly loved by the Trek community and everybody he knew. So
and it's great. And it's great to hear. It's great to hear people talk about Gary in such a positive light. So I want to. I think we're fortunate to have Star Trek actors who appreciate their fandom, right?
Yes,
I think that's important. So.
Yeah, I want to just make a note that he does actually have one more thing that's in post-production. It was a film that was written by his daughter Haley. I'm hard pressed to remember the name of it. I know I read it last night. But he was working on a project that his daughter wrote, where he was a supporting character. And so he's still got that to come out when that finishes being edited.
Oh, okay.
So Haley Graham is the writer and producer on that, and that is his only daughter. And she's having a rough time. I read some of her posts last night. She's having a rough time, but having both lost parents, I know what a rough time that is, and anybody who's lost an immediate family member or anything. And so we feel the loss of him as somebody we admire and respect, but it's another thing when it's an immediate family member. So our thoughts and our support go out to her as well. So, all right, absolutely. Moving right along, while the fact that we do have Gary as part of the next two scenes of Axanar is very good news. I understand we've got some additional production news, which seems to be good news as well. What do we have for the production updates for the next two episodes of Axanar, Alec?
So our final shoot happens next month.
Okay.
February. And it is two actors.
That's in Georgia. That's in Georgia, or that's in California?
In Georgia. Yep. Yep. One day at our studio in Georgia. Sonia Alexander and Moreau, those two characters will shoot. And we've been pretty open that we're reshooting Moreau because the actor that we had, who did a wonderful job, we just weren't getting that this guy was old. That this guy was retired and Karn's mentor, right? He seemed the same age as Karn. And we're like, gotcha. That just, and we did not plan on facial appliances. That would have been a whole nother thing. So we're like, okay, we got to redo that. So we recast it with another actor. Everyone will be happy about.
An older actor?
Sorry?
Is the actor older?
Yeah, yes, the actor is in his late 70s.
Okay.
And then what we did was we basically took some lines that we liked and made the actor that we used the last time is still in Axanar. He's still got a few lines, and we're just making him a general, right? General, whatever his name is.
Okay.
Kick my ass. Something with a K, right? We needed something. He's Klingon. Anyway, so that's happened. So that is it. When we shoot that weekend, we are done. We are done with principal photography. I know we're already in post-production.
You're already in post-production. Okay.
We're in post-production. We had a meeting with our composers. We had a meeting with our one VFX team. The other VFX team we have a meeting with next week. 2 weeks, I think. So it's all going along. Maybe not as quickly as we'd like, but it's all happening. And
are we still on track for a summer release?
We're on track. Whether we made it or not, we'll see. But we're we won't let the schedule slide unless the work tells us it's not going to be. If the VFX team says there's no way this is getting done by this date, then it may not. I've kind of already. I'm like, Matt, we're not going to be ready.
I don't have a problem with however long it takes because I look at it two ways. We waited this long. What's a couple weeks or months longer? And two, I think of my other favorite fan film, which has almost the same level of quality as Axanar, and that's the Tresorian intersection from Starship Exeter.
Yeah.
And they put out each section. It's filmed like a TV episode, and each section, like between commercial breaks, was released like 3, 4, 6 months apart. But now that it's been out for years and you watch them all together, you don't ever watch it and go, wow, it looked like it took them 4 years to put that out. You just say, wow, it's really, really well produced. So whether you release it in June or July or August, I don't care. I just want it to be as good as you can make it. And I have every confidence that that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, because speed is not one of our issues.
It never has been.
Well, yeah. It's at this point, we don't have to worry about budget. We have to worry about quality.
Right.
So it's quality. We have the budget. Quality is everything. And so if it takes us longer, it takes us longer. But we want to make sure, because the difference between, as you said, because 5 years from now, no one's going to remember that we pushed it from summer to fall, if that happens, right? No one cares. Everyone will care about the quality. And, again, the bar is set really high, and we got to make sure we hit that as much to the chagrin of CBS and Paramount, who, by the way, may well be part of Warner Brothers within the next few months.
Really?
Warner Brothers is in discussion. Warner Brothers is in discussion to acquire Paramount because Sherry Redstone is looking to sell it. She's the majority shareholder of National Amusement, which is the parent company of Paramount. So she's looking to sell. Word is there may be an auction between Paramount and a production company, Skydance.
Okay.
But which doesn't make much sense.
Skydance is JJ.
So much sense for Warner Brothers to
robot.
Yeah, it makes so much sense for Warner Brothers to pick it up.
I wish somebody who has true passion for the core of Star Trek for the last 60 years had the money and could just cherry pick the Star Trek franchise and do that.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, but it is what it is. We'll see. We're keeping our fingers crossed because if Warner Brothers takes it, we hope there would be new management for Star Trek. We hope they put Terry Matalas in charge. And Terry
Matalas did a stellar job, but I also hear rumblings that he was a little hard to work with, despite his fandom and despite how good his finished product is. I hear he's a little hard to work with.
Oh, okay. That's.
I mean, I hope that's not the case, but I'd like to be in charge of Star Trek. I'd make the Axanar TV series. I'd put Matalas. I'd put Matalas in charge of his Star Trek Legacy project. I'd do more Prodigy and Lower Decks.
Prodigy.
Yeah, I know those things, and then I'd get back into making Trek that looks like it was the offshoot of the Berman Braga era, not whatever we have now.
Yeah. But you can keep that alternate universe Star Trek Strange New Worlds,
We'll have to give it. No, you want to know something? If it was Strange New Worlds, I think the actors are great. I think the whole concept of the show is great. I'd do like a Gene Roddenberry. I'd make it like the animated series where that was all apocryphal. I would rebuild the sets so they look like ships we're used to, and I would reframe the entire Strange New Worlds. And I go, listen, I want everybody to go watch The Cage. You see Brooding Pike over there? That's who I want you to play, not this happy-go-lucky making you omelets in my quarters guy. That's just
by the way,
I could be wrong.
I'm going to put a plug in for a show that I've been watching. I just subscribed to Apple TV.
Excellent.
Plus.
Are you going to say For All Mankind?
Well, that's one, For All Mankind, which was season 4, I guess.
And with Mike and Denise Okuda as technical people on that show, you can't call yourself a Trek fan or a science fiction fan and not be watching For All Mankind.
Yeah, no, it was a very good show. But the other one that's been a pleasant surprise is Monarch: Legacy of Monsters.
Wow. I am not a Godzilla or a monster guy. I am loving Monarch. And if you haven't seen up until the end of this season, just think of all of the monsters for them to end up the location they ended up in the season finale, which should have been a tip off right there, and then to see the cliffhanger they leave it on, I was like, wow, that is super cool.
Well, yeah, I'm not to the end yet, but we'll see.
Oh, then I'm glad I didn't spoil it for you, because I don't like spoilers anyway. But if you're gonna love the finale, and the finale's okay. Do you remember the feeling at the end of the end?
Let's not go off the deep end like
no, I'm not. I'm just gonna ask Trek fan to Trek fan. Do you remember the feeling you got at the end of the Best of Both Worlds Part 1, where they just ended at that point, and you're like, oh my God, now I want more? That's the way you're going to feel at the finale of Monarch Legacy of Monsters.
Oh, that's good. And there's some good, very, very good acting.
Well, the fact that Kurt Russell and his son play the same character over 50 years, that's brilliant.
Yep.
Because you believe it's the same guy.
You do. You absolutely do. Yeah. You know, and it's amazing how much they sound alike.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, well, good.
So, all right, Alec. You froze up there for a second. All right, Alec, is there anything else we want to plug before we wrap up this episode?
No, that's it. We do have a new section of the website, I should point out, Axanar Legal Watch. If you're interested in all the legal challenges that we've got, we're now we've got people writing about it and posting articles, so you can stay up to date on the latest and greatest. But other than that, you can get me at alec@axanar.com. Feel free to email me if you have any questions, and we will keep you posted of what's happening with the shoot next month, and then after that, how post-production is going, and when we wind up with a trailer and then a release date.
Excellent. And I'm Keith M. Sedor. I'm the host of the Trek Sports Roundtable podcast. And if you want to see my little tribute to Gary, it's some nice pictures from Axicon. You can go over to the Trek Sports Roundtable Facebook page. And I haven't mentioned this to you, Alec. I'll plug this publicly here. I am hosting a brand new podcast with J.G. Hertzler and Robert O'Reilly called Wormholes and Donut Holes. The first episode, we're having a problem with the iTunes aggregator right now. So if you want to hear the first episode, it's at computertalkradio.com/podcast, and then in all caps, Klingon. So computertalkradio.com/all lowercase podcast, all caps Klingon. First episode is there. Basically, in that premiere episode, we're talking to J.G. Hertzler and Robert O'Reilly, who played Gowron and Chancellor Martok, about how they got their respective roles in Star Trek. And then other episodes, they're going to kind of do a deep dive into whatever topics float their fancy. So
fantastic.
All right. You've been listening to Official Axanar Podcast number 72. We'll catch you next time.
Live long and prosper.
Kablah.